Okay, I think this is going to be part 7. Hold on. Okay. Hold on. Let me fix the stupid mic. Somebody was in here messing with my stuff. Okay. Somebody was in here messing with my stuff. Okay, but yeah, I think this is going to be part 7. This is where I stopped yesterday. I would have gotten this done much sooner, but I went back to bed as soon as I saw that my mom was up and getting the kids ready for school. Wilfred's Day as the High Bishop. I hate how Rosamund gets everything she wants. I'm her older brother, and I finished my baptism back in spring. But she's the one who gets all the attention. Lampert says she's having it rough in her own ways, but that's gotta be him lying to protect his little sister. I mean, a bit of running was all it took for her to fall over and almost die. How could she do anything? Rosamund's the only one who gets to leave the castle whenever she wants, doesn't get stuck with teachers, and gets complimented by Father at dinner. I mean, she's already... If you'd have her go and do studying, then you would already see that she can do all that stuff. So she doesn't need teachers for that stuff anyway. I'm not even allowed to go to his office since I'll get in the way. But he lets Rosamund in. It's just not fair. When I told Rosamund how I felt, she suggested we switch places for a day. That was the best idea I'd ever heard. I'd get to leave the castle and all my annoying retainers and go to the temple where I could do whatever I wanted, just like Rosamund did. Meanwhile, she could enjoy being surrounded by a bunch of teachers. Shall we go, Lord Wilfred? Lampert asked before spreading the wings of his high beast and soaring up into the air. I was sitting in front of him, and the feeling of rising into the air and flying filled me with complete giddiness. It really wasn't fair that Rosamund had gotten to experience this first. Oh, boo-hoo-hoo. So she got to experience it first. Just because you're older doesn't mean you get to experience everything first. Everybody grows at different rates. Lampert, when I make my high beast, is it going to be a lion like Ferdinand's? I asked, looking ahead at Ferdinand, who was guiding us to the temple. Lampert nodded. Yes, children of the Archduke use single-headed lions, and when you become the Archduke yourself, you can make one that has 3 heads like the duchy symbol. I had never seen Father's high beast myself, but it sounded pretty super cool. Of course he'd have a super cool high beast. And what it was while I was thinking about the awesome lion I was going to have that I realized. Rosamund's high beast didn't look like a lion, though. It was peculiar, wasn't it? I've never seen a high beast like that myself either, Lampert replied. It wasn't long before the temple came into view. It was located right between the pure white nobles' quarter and the brown, messy other side of the city. I'd heard about it being on the other side of the nobles' quarter, but it was a lot closer than I thought. Oh, God. Lampert, what's that brown, dirty-looking area? The lower city, where commoners live. It's not a place you will ever have anything to do with, Lord Wilfred. Well, I mean, dude, if he's going to be the Archduke, he's going to have to find out about all this stuff sooner or later. A man wearing grey robes was there to welcome us when our high beast landed at the temple, and his eyes widened when he saw me. Ferdinand immediately got down from his high beast and gave him a letter. Fran, read this. It's from Rosamund. The two of them are swapping places for the day, Ferdinand said. Wilfred, this is Fran. He is Rosamund's head attendant in the temple. While you are here, you will do exactly as he says. Fran, I imagine that dealing with Wilfred will be quite the task. I shall join you at a later time. Understood, High Priest. A pleasure to see you, Lord Wilfred. Shall we go and get you changed? Very well, I replied. I was taken to the High Bishop's chambers that Rosamund lived in. Once there, Fran told Rosamund's other attendants that I was going to be the High Bishop for a day, at which point they put me in white robes. This was apparently what the High Bishop wore. What tea do you prefer? An attendant I called Nicola asked while Fran was reading Rosamund's letter. She then made some delicious tea and served me sweets that I had never seen before. As they broke apart in my mouth, I was overwhelmed by an amazing sweetness. I never had sweets like this before. Rosamund gets all the luck. I wish I got to eat things like this all day, I complained while taking another one. Upon hearing that, Nicola beamed a smile. Lady Rosamund invented the recipes for these sweets, so if you would like to eat sweets you've never tasted before, I suggest you do the same and come up with your recipes yourself. Do you have any ideas? I love making things. I love eating them more, though, she said with a chuckle, her eyes filled with anticipation, but how could I know any recipes for sweets I hadn't eaten before? Rosamund invented these sweets? Is that even possible? How do you just think up sweets, I thought, stuffing my face with another as I struggled to work it out. By the time Lampert arrived, whether I was going to hand any down, I'd already eaten all but a few. I regretfully passed the rest to him. While I was sipping the rest of my tea, Fran said something to the attendant called Monica that made her hurriedly leave the room. Ferdinand entered shortly after, almost like he'd deliberately timed it so that I'd just be finishing my drink. He was wearing the blue high priest robes that I had seen at Rosamond's baptism. According to Rosamond's chart, your schedule for today is to receive a report at the orphanage, then look over the workshop. Lampert and Daniel will accompany you as guards, while Fran and Monica will serve as your attendants, Ferdinand announced. At that, Rosamond's female knight, who had entered with Ferdinand, saluted and stepped aside. I then accompanied Ferdinand out of the room, through some hallways, and over to another building. This is the orphanage where children without parents are gathered. Beyond these doors is a dining hall, Fran said, before opening them to reveal a sizable room with large but crude-looking wooden tables lined up beside one another. I looked around curious, and that was when I noticed all the people kneeling inside. They were all wearing the same gray robes. It was probably like the uniform that scholars wore. No, they're all gray priests. High Bishop and High Priest, please take your seats, Fran said. I wasn't that eager to sit on a plain wooden board, but Ferdinand sat down like it was nothing at all, so I didn't have much choice but to do the same. Getting straight to the point. I have heard there is a report for the High Bishop. Would the one responsible for the report please come forward and begin? An orange-haired woman stepped forward, faced me, and started giving a report that I couldn't understand at all. Ferdinand nodded at times while Fran was writing some stuff down on a weird board he had. Well, what are you even saying? I asked. I am giving this month's financial report, the woman replied. What does that have to do with me? I asked. And in the next instance, Ferdinand struck me on the head with a smack. The shock was the worst part, and I held my head in surprise while trying to process what just happened. Lampert was just as surprised, and he looked at Ferdinand with wide open eyes. Lord Ferdinand? What? I could barely even speak. There was a hot, stinging pain building up where he had hit me, but the only thing I could do was shoot him a dumbfounded glare. You fool. Rosamond is the High Bishop and orphanage director. You have swapped places with her, which means that this has everything to do with you. Even if you do not understand, sit still and keep your silence. Such is Rosamond's duty. Even though I was clearly annoyed, Ferdinand just glared back and scolded me. I decided to scowl at the woman giving the report, hoping that I'd make her finish this boring thing as soon as possible, but she just giggled and continued, not even skipping anything on her sheet. It sucked. Does she seriously not realize that I'm mad? What a dense woman. Oh, shut up, Wilfred. Someone needs to put him in his place. The report was so boring that about midway through I decided to go and wander around instead, but when I tried to jump down from my seat, Ferdinand shot his hand down and pinched my leg. That hurts, Ferdinand. What are you doing? Did you not hear me when I said to sit still, or was it simply beyond your comprehension? Are you stupid, or are you simply deaf? Perhaps even both, Ferdinand remarked, looking down at me with cold eyes like he wholeheartedly thought I was an idiot. Yeah, you kinda are, a little bit. But that can change. Blood rushed to my head. I'd never been so humiliated in my life. Oh my god. Ferdinand, put him in his place. Please. I stood up to punch Ferdinand, but when I barely even balled my fist when he clamped a hand down over my forehead and thrust me back into the chair. Shut up, sit down, and listen. Understand? Lampert. I called in my bodyguard, who was making no move to help me, but Ferdinand just squeezed my head even harder. How many times must I repeat myself? Shut up, sit down, and listen. Some of the kids started giggling as they watched Ferdinand hold me in place. I could hear them saying things like, doesn't he understand? And he just needs to listen. Yeah, it's not that big a deal, just listen. I'll listen, okay? Just let go. You fool, do not waste the time of others with such pointless tantrums, Ferdinand said with a derisive scoff before releasing his grip. Pain radiated from my head as though his fingers had left permanent marks. They might have. With his luck, he probably did. I spent the rest of the report glaring at Ferdinand and from the side, unable to stand up or do anything but stew in my anger. God, curse you, Ferdinand. That concludes this month's report. I have a bit more to discuss with Fran and the High Priest, so why don't you spend some time playing karate with the children, High Bishop, the woman suggested. My ears perked up at the word play. I quickly looked at Ferdinand, who glanced over the orphan children before returning a slow nod and saying, very well. I leaped off the bench in an instant, stretched a bit, and then followed Lampert and Daniel over to where all the kids were. So what is karate? I asked. I'll teach you, one kid said. We can play together. Playing against adults was one thing, but I'd never lost to any of the kids who came to play in the castle. I needed to use this opportunity to prove to all the kids who had laughed at me how amazing I really was. First, someone reads the written card, then everyone else tries to grab the art card that has the same first letter as that written word. When whoever gets the most wins, the kid continued. Since this is your first time playing, High Bishop, you can have one of your guards help out. I hadn't played karate before, so teaming up with Lampert was probably a good idea. Plus, this kid was the one who'd suggested it, so it wasn't unfair at all. I sat next to Lampert and started playing. I had assumed Daniel would be the one reading the cards, but instead it was a kid about as old as me. You can read? That's really impressive. Not even I can read yet, I said awestruck, but rather than appreciate the praise, The kids all gave me a confused look. Huh? You're the High Bishop, but you can't read? Thanks to the cards and picture books Lady Rosemine made, everyone in the orphanage can read. Oh, but not Dirk, he's just a baby, one of the kids added, pointing at a baby crawling across the floor. It was apparently normal for all the kids in the orphanage to be able to read, and the only one who couldn't was a baby, smaller than my little brother Melchior. So I'm basically the same as that baby, I thought, completely taken aback. In the end, Lampert was only able to get the single card that was closest to us. The other kids took all the others. What a miserable defeat. This is what happens when you are challenged by children not instructed to lose by their parents, Ferdinand said. Ha ha. Yeah, because usually, I'm assuming that when Wilfred would have kids to come play with him, the kids were all told by their parents to let him win because he's the son of the Archduke. Or that he's going to be the Archduke, or whatever, you know. Well, Ferdinand, you can't just say that, Lampert began, only to be interrupted. It is the truth, and one he needs to face, Ferdinand said, giving another derisive laugh before moving on. Follow me. Curse you, Ferdinand. You're going to be cursing him a lot. He's going to be putting you in the Valley of Despair, dude. We next went through the boys' building of the orphanage to reach the workshop. There were adults there and kids as young as me, all wearing cruddy-looking clothes, and whatever they were making had made their hands and faces all dirty. This is Lord Wilfred, who is serving as the High Bishop in Lady Rosemine's place for today. Fran said to introduce me. At that, two young boys stepped forward, knelt down, and began their noble greetings. Oh, God. So he can do that too? Okay. I pray for a blessing in appreciation of the serendipitous meeting ordained by the fruitful days of Shitsaria, the goddess of wind, they said. I poured wine into my ring, though I wasn't too good at doing it yet. Before I continued made this meeting, people asked. This time I actually did pretty well. I nodded to myself, then looked at Lampert, who gave me a smile and returned my nod in approval. Let's go, you may stand. You called Rosemine over today, I believe. What is your business? Wilfred shall be handling it in her place. We finished a new picture book and wanted to give her a copy. Please deliver this to Lady Rosemine. And here is one for you, Lord Wilfred. Please accept it as a gift celebrating our meeting. The green-eyed kid said before handing me 2 books. They were shoddily made, basically nothing more than bundles of paper. They were thin, tiny, and didn't even have covers. It was hard to imagine that they were actually books. Picture books? What kind of books are these? What do you do with them? You read them. What do you think you do with books? Rosemine recently started making them, and she was looking forward to the completion of this one. Rosemine made these too? She didn't make them herself, but she taught them how to make them. I started flipping through one of the picture books, looking at the large black and white illustrations inside. Some pages had text, just like the cards. I then glanced at the 2 kids who were both looking about my age. They were holding their heads high and their eyes were full of confidence. Can you 2 read this book? Of course. We wouldn't be able to work if we didn't know how to read. I studied really hard to learn, the purple-eyed kid said with a proud smile. It may be rare for commoners to know how to read, but even they can learn when it's necessary for work. It may be rude to present someone who can't read with a book the first time you meet them, but as you're a noble, I'm certain that we don't have to worry about that, the green-eyed kid said, nervously glancing over at Ferdinand for confirmation. Once again, Ferdinand smirked, looking down at me with cold, mocking eyes. Yes, anyone who has received a noble's education will know how to read. It would be quite unlikely to ever meet a noble who couldn't. That is a relief. Oh, Ferdinand, you're enjoying this. All nobles can read, and commoners can learn when they need to for work. I could feel my expression stiffen as I looked down at the picture book. Return to your work, everyone. I intend to show him what exactly is done here, Ferdinand instructed, at which point all those who had been kneeling stood up and resumed their work. I watched them go, conscious that they had started glancing my way, and saw the kids who had given me the picture book started counting sheets of paper and giving instructions to those who had a free hand. Ferdinand, why are those 2 kids giving instructions when there are so many adults here? One is an apprentice attendant, and the other is an apprentice merchant, but both are close to and have been personally trained by Rosemine. They receive direct instructions from her, operate the workshop, and give her reports. Whether due to the enormous responsibility they carry or Rosemine's instruction, they are both growing blisteringly fast. It might be that she has a natural talent for raising people, Ferdinand said. He only ever insulted and mocked me, but he was praising the kids in the workshop and Rosemine for having raised them. I could feel an uncomfortable heat building up in my chest. That was 5th bell. We'll be returning to your chambers now. Everyone, you have worked well today. I hope to see your dedication continue. As you wish. Those in the workshop replied, kneeling and giving proud smiles of Ferdinand's praise. Yeah, he is praising them. That's very good, to be honest, considering the guy more than likely rarely gives that praise unless he deems it worthy of it. So, it's good. They're doing really well. With the picture books in hand, I returned to the High Bishop's chambers. My lessons normally ended in the afternoon at fifth bell, after which I'd be free for the rest of the day. And I'd assumed that the same would be true here. Nope. Nopety nope nope. But once I was back, Fran started piling a ton of boards on the table. What are these? The words of prayers that you must learn before leaving for the Harvest Festival. You won't need to know about the festival itself since you won't be going there, Lord Wolfer, but since the prayers will prove useful for magic, I think you should find it useful to learn them now, Fran said. Lampert picked up a board and skimmed it, then widened his eyes in surprise. Are you telling me Rosemine is memorizing this? Yes. Of course. Lady Rosemine is the High Bishop, Fran replied with a nod, speaking like it was the most obvious thing in the world. You know that a single mistake in noble society could give someone a negative reputation that never goes away, yes? Now she's the Archduke's adopted daughter. Lady Rosemine is not permitted to fail. She is having quite a tough time during her first year since every ceremony is new to her, and she must continually memorize the words to do prayers. But she is managing things thanks to her admirable perseverance. Fran went on to list each ritual that Rosemine had to give a prayer at one by one, counting on his fingers as he went. She had been assigned as the High Bishop in summer, meaning that she had only experienced a single season's worth of rituals. And yet she had performed the Starbind ceremony, the Summer Coming of Age ceremony, the Autumn Baptism ceremony, and would soon be heading off to administer the Harvest Festival throughout the Central District. The High Bishop had an unbelievably busy schedule. Well, duh. I can't do this. I don't know how to read, I said, shaking my head after looking at the border of prayers written on it. Rosemine had to memorize these, sure, but I didn't. I handed the board back to Fran, who then simply passed it on to Lampert. In that case, Sir Lampert will read it out loud, and you will learn by repeating what he says. You may eat dinner when you are finished. What? Anyone can memorize something if they take it seriously. High Priest, allow me to brew you some tea. You must be tired, Fran said before smoothly heading to the kitchen. The fact that he wasn't listening to me at all made me so mad that I shouted at his back as he went. I don't want to. I'm not going to memorize this, I yelled, stamping my feet in anger. Fran turned back around with a worried frown on his face. Before he could speak, Ferdinand let out a loud, exaggerated sigh. Good grief, Fran, it seems that Wilford doesn't need dinner tonight. If he hadn't finished memorizing the prayers by 6 bell, begin eating without him. The divine gifts won't be ready for the orphanage otherwise. Understood. Curse you, Ferdinand. You didn't have to say that. I gritted my teeth and glared at Ferdinand, but he just looked back at me with cold, narrowed eyes. He wasn't afraid of me at all. Well, he's the high priest. 2, he's your uncle. 3, he can kick your ass and back many times over. And he would more than likely do it with a freaking smile on his face, because he would enjoy it. Kicking a brat like you around. This is why bastards are the worst. Jerk! He can't help that! I hate bastards. I silently shouted the word that grandmother has said all the time, which calmed me down just a little, even though I didn't actually know what it meant. Dude, you really don't need to know what it means. Now that I thought about it, there was no way they wouldn't let me eat dinner even if I didn't memorize any of the prayers. Up until now, I had never been punished that much by skipping out on lessons and refusing to learn to read, and this was going to be just like that. All I needed to do was wait for Ferdinand to leave. When 6 bell rang, Ferdinand went to eat in his own chambers. I glanced Fran's way and saw that after seeing him off, he had gone to start serving dinner. I knew it. Of course he cares about me more than Ferdinand's orders. Nope. Nope. I let Etta please snort and waited for my dinner to be served. Lampert was excited to eat, saying the food here tastes better than the stuff in the dice norm, and the sweets were good enough that I was just as eager. My apologies for the wait, Sir Lampert. Your food has been prepared. Dame Bridget has offered to eat later, so you may eat alongside Sir Daniel, if you would like. I see. I wouldn't mind eating with Daniel, but Lampert nervously looked between Fran and me. Do not worry. Dame Bridget shall look after Lord Wilford while you are having dinner. We know it would be uncomfortable for you to eat in front of him while he is unable to, so we have prepared a separate room for you, Fran said. I was hit by such a strong wave of shock that I almost fell over. He actually wasn't going to let me eat just like Ferdinand had ordered. This guy worked for him. He's going to listen to Ferdinand more than he's going to listen to you. He still listens to Rosemond because, well, he respects her and everything, probably as much as the High Priest, but not you. You haven't earned that respect. That much respect, anyway. Fran, do you have any idea what you're doing? Don't you know who I am? I have informed you that you would only be eating once you had memorized the prayers, and Lord Ferdinand has ordered me to follow through on this, Fran said calmly. The attendants in the castle would always freak out and fall over themselves to serve me, but Fran wasn't listening at all. What was going on? Well, duh. Who do you think is more important here, me or Ferdinand? Lord Ferdinand, of course. What? But I'm the Archduke's first son, I yelled. Don't lump me in with a bastard. Ooh. Ooh. I don't like that. In the castle, everyone said I was of higher status than Ferdinand since he was a bastard and I wasn't. Jerk. I'd assumed that Fran just didn't know that, but when I looked up to see his reaction, he was shaking his head with exasperation. At the moment, you are serving as the High Bishop in Lady Rosemine's place. She has given me strict instructions not to spoil you as the Archduke's son, but to treat you in the same way that she would be treated as Lord Ferdinand's ward. To not spoil me? I stammered, unable to believe what I had just heard. That was when the memory of Rosamine saying, "Then you will have no problem with my attendants treating you like normal," flashed from my mind. I naturally replied to that by saying of course, but it still didn't make any sense. Letting me eat dinner would be spoiling me? Allowing you to use your status to avoid responsibilities and punishments would be spoiling you. That you think doing as is normal and appropriate just shows just how spoiled you have been throughout your life. An experience not shared by Lady Rosamine, Fran said, before turning to face Lampert. Sir Lampert, please begin eating. We must take the leftovers to the orphanage afterwards, so delays have long-reaching consequences. It would be best for you to entrust Lord Wilford to us. You are a reminder of his normal life, and while you are around, he will expect to be spoiled, Fran said, with a composed smile that left no room for argument. He then took Lampert elsewhere, leaving me alone in a room with nobody I knew very well. "Shall I read the board for you, Lord Wilford?" the female knight called Bridget asked, before taking the board and standing beside me. "The attendants have been here may be kind and loyal, but they are not soft in the slightest. This must be a shock for you. She had been assigned to guard Rosamine after her heart baptism, so she would probably be able to tell me, from a proper noble's perspective, what life in the temple was like. Are the attendants here hard on Rosamine too?" "Yes. They are doing their best to ensure that Lady Rosamine fulfills her duties as both the Archduke's daughter and the High Bishop without error. When I first started serving her, I complained to Fran that the burden on her was much too great, but ultimately he just reprimanded me," Bridget said, offering a sad smile as she looked at the board. If things were bad enough that a guard knight had chosen to speak up, then Rosamine's situation had to be really harsh. And she has more than just this to memorize. Yes, she has to learn not only the prayers, but the progression of each ritual, the key points to be aware of, who to give blessings to, and the total number of people involved in each ceremony. This pile of boards contains far more information than just the words to prayers, and thus far she has always successfully completed her duty when the time came. Which is surprising considering she has complained in a past book that her memory is bad. That's impressive. I couldn't believe how different Rosamine's life was from mine. It never occurred to me that I really was being spoiled that bad. "Read the board for me, please." "As you wish." Bridget read the board aloud for me, and I repeated her words until I had memorized them. When Lampert finished eating and returned, his eyes widened in surprise at me. "I see you have worked very hard. That is excellent," Fran said, praising me for the first time before placing enough dinner for one person on the table. I had just barely managed to finish memorizing the prayers before 7th bell, and even though I was eating later than anyone else, the food was still steaming and warm. The chefs must have waited for me so that my dinner would still taste good. I get it now. They're kind, but they don't spoil anyone. Well, no dip. As I started eating the warm food, I let out a sigh. I really wanted to go back to the castle. I wanted to tell Father and Mother that I had memorized a prayer, and have them compliment me for doing well. "Eating alone is kind of sad," I said aloud. "Lady Rosamine says the same thing at times." "Huh? Rosamine eats here alone sometimes?" After dinner, the attendants bathed me, and each gave me a report on their day's work. That had never happened before. My attendants were either busy attending me or searching for me. They had never had any work to do when I wasn't around. Once their reports were over, it was finally time for me to sleep. I was exhausted. I had never been this tired before in my entire life. It was the first time I'd ever used my head so much, so despite it being earlier than I usually went to bed, I'd passed out in no time. "It is morning, Lord Wilford." No sooner had I heard the voice than someone pulled aside the curtains over my bed. I shut my eyes as tightly as I could to block out the bright sunlight. "I'm still tired. It is time to wake up." "Lay off. I said I'm still tired," I yelled, pulling the covers up over my head, only for them to be ripped away by force. "Ooh. Yeah, you ain't getting off that easy, dude. You got a lot to do." I widened my eyes looking for who would wake me up in such a violent manner, only to see that it was none of my usual attendants. Fran forced the mattress up at an angle, making me slide right off. Wow. "I told you that it was time to wake up. Please get changed and eat breakfast. I had already given you as much time as can be spared." Morning came especially early in the temple, and this was the first time I'd ever been literally forced out of bed. Yeah, you did. Fran changed my clothes and served me breakfast. My head was really fuzzy while I ate, since I'd normally still be in bed at this time. After breakfast, it will be time to practice Harpspiel. Rosamine's music teacher said as she brought in the instrument. It was sized for children, and the sight alone was enough to make me grimace. I'm not good with Harpspiels. I don't like them. In that case, there is an even greater need for you to practice and improve. Music is the cultured pastime of nobles, she said. I knew that playing instruments was important for nobles, but not everyone was great at the harpsichord. Karstedt had said I could one day pick up an instrument I liked myself, which explained why he was good at the flute. But when I said that to my music teacher, she just cocked her head. I have spent spring prayer with Lord Karstedt in the past, and while he prefers the flute to the harpsichord, he was not incapable of playing the latter. Learning the notes and lyrics to harpsichord songs is the foundation from which you develop your musical tastes. Wishing to play other instruments is no excuse to not play the harpsichord. What the? I stammered. Neither Karstedt nor my music teacher had ever said anything like that. Not to mention, since you were baptized this year, both you and Lady Rosemine will be debuting in the winter. I have heard from the high priest that there is a recital where all the children play a harpsichord song in public. If you do not practice, will you not be bringing shame upon yourself when you cannot do what all the other children can? She asked, reminding me of when I was the only one who couldn't read cards yesterday. My cheeks flushed. Just thinking about the same thing happening in front of nobles made me feel a weird mix of pathetic, frustrated, and just plain awful. Is Rosemine practicing every day? There are times when her schedule does not permit practice, but when she is in the temple, she practices every day without fail. Skills degrade if you do not spend time honing them, the instructor said before taking out some sheet music. Nobody improves dramatically overnight, so daily practice is key. Please continue until you can play at least one song before winter. Think of nothing else, just focus on a single song. I only needed to learn a single song before winter, so maybe I could manage. That day, despite it being harpsichord practice, all I did was hum the notes on the sheet music. I wasn't allowed to touch the instrument even once. When practice ended the third bell, the instructor praised me with a pretty smile. Very good. Upon returning to the castle, please practice moving your fingers in tune with the scales you have learned. You learned them very quickly, so you must have a good memory. Yeah, when he wants to. I felt a tingling sensation in my chest, maybe because I wasn't used to being complimented. She encouraged me to keep practicing, saying that this one song was all I needed to learn to hold my head up high at the winter debut. Back at the castle, third bell was when my morning professor would arrive, but there was no professor here. I relaxed, thinking that I was finally getting some free time, only for Fran to come in carrying a bunch of things. It is time to assist the high priest with his work. Huh? The high priest is handling the bulk of the high bishop's work, outside of performing ceremony of prayers, so in order to lessen his load, Lady Rosemine assists him with his paperwork from third to fourth bell. Now then, please hurry up, Sir Lampret. Fran rushed me and Lampret along to Ferdinand's room. There were a number of attendants there, all handling their own work. Helping out here will probably make me feel a little proud, since it was like I was on equal footing with the adults. As I stepped inside, determined to work like the kids I had seen at the workshop yesterday, Ferdinand glanced up at his paper. Ah, here you are, Wilfred. Sit over there and practice your letters. There's a stone slate with examples for you to write on. Lampret, here's some math that needs to be done, he said, pointing toward a table that his attendants were putting some slates, paper, and cards onto. In the blink of an eye, there was ink and a calculator there as well. Writing letters? So I'm not going to help with your work? What a foolish question! How in the world could you help me when you do not even know how to read and write? Ferdinand asked, not even bothering to look up from his paperwork this time. But Rose, she could write just fine before I even met her. She quickly learned new words, and when introduced to the bookroom, she read its scriptures so enthusiastically that I had hardly needed to teach her anything writing related myself. Ferdinand continued, Rosemine had apparently learned to write without his help. Just what in the world is my little sister? Dude, you have no idea what she is. Oh boy. Rosemine is skilled in math, so you would expect from someone who owns a workshop and has spent so much time with merchants. The boards in front of Lampret contain all of the work that she would normally do. I trust that you shall handle it well, since you have so generously offered to take her place. Lampert's eye widened his eyes at the stack of boards. He'd always sympathized with me for not wanting to study math, probably because he was bad at it himself. I thought I was here for work, but it's just writing practice? I'm not going to bother doing that. I'm out of here, I declared, jumping down from my seat to run away like I always did. Ferdinand whipped out his staff and chanted something quickly under his breath. Several beams of light shot from the staff and wrapped around me, making it so I couldn't move it out. Ha ha, you got tied up. With the bands of magic holding my legs together, I clumsily fell flat on my face. Lord Ferdinand, what in the world? Lampret began in shock, but Ferdinand interrupted him by striding forward, picking me up like I was furniture, and roughly setting me back into the chair. I will not allow you to run away. You said that you would be switching places with Rosemine today. If you are truly the Archduke's son, you must at least take responsibility for the promises you make, Ferdinand said, tying me to the chair with actual rope before disappearing the magic bands. He was being so rough and disrespectful that I didn't even know what to say. I had no idea why he was being allowed to do this to me, or why nobody was saying anything to him about it. Lampret, get to work already, Ferdinand instructed. Now is not the time to stare into space. You are wasting time. The fact that Lampert immediately shot up, straightened his back, and got right to work told me that I couldn't win against Ferdinand. With no other choice, I reached for the stone slate. Ferdinand's room was eerily quiet. The only noises were the scratching of pens, clacks of calculators, muted requests for permission, and the quiet rustle of papers as people delivered their finished work. It felt like I was going to suffocate. I tried to practice writing at first, but as soon I set the stone slate aside, and my hand started to hurt a little. Ferdinand noticed this, stood up, and walked over to examine it. Is that the best you can do? Lord Wilford is very much trying his best, Lord Ferdinand, Lampert answered for me. Yeah, this is way more practice than I would ever normally do. Praise me more, I thought, cheering Lampert on internally, but Ferdinand just looked down at Lampert with the same cold eyes he gave me. It is because of you spoiling Wilford in such a manner that he has grown up to be so slothful and foolish. Lampert gasped, his eyes wide open. His mouth flopped as though he was about to protest, but he ultimately just bit his lip and fell silent. Ferdinand gave a dismissive humph, then turned his icy golden eyes to me. Wilford, there is nobody in the castle willing to be honest with you, so it is here that I must inform you of reality. You have neither the resolve, nor the dedication, nor the attitude that the son of an archduke needs. You have noble blood, but it is wasted on a foolish, selfish child such as yourself. That wasn't true. I had the proper attitude for an archduke's son. No, you do not! Dude, do you ever think... No, he does not think. What am I saying? What's more, Ferdinand was the only one calling me foolish and selfish. Nobody else did. Everything he was saying here was wrong. Ferdinand, you're being disrespectful, I yelled. Disrespectful? No, I am speaking the truth. You have been baptized, yet you cannot read, write, or do math. You are an incompetent fool who uses his status as the Archduke's son to evade all responsibility. If asked to help Sylvester with his work, you would not be able to help him in the slightest. You are a useless waste of space. Do not expect me to spoil you as well. I growled and glared up at Ferdinand. As much as I wanted to shout that he was wrong, I couldn't manage the words. Lord Ferdinand, that is going much too far. You seem to be lazing about as well, Lampert. Rosamond will be long finished with that amount of work by now. You are slow. I see that both servant and master are equally useless, Ferdinand remarked, dismissing Lampert's protest before looking straight at me. Wilford, your father experienced much grief due to problems with succession, and as long as there are no problems with your mana, he wishes for you to succeed him as his oldest son. I knew that. Both father and grandmother had said I'd be the next Archduke. Sylvester seems to think that a leader can be as incompetent as he wishes as long as he surrounds himself with competent allies. But there's a difference between gathering competent allies and dragging them down into the mud, forcing them to compensate for your unending failures. And unlike Sylvester, you do not have the charisma and strength of spirit to naturally gather allies. Lord Ferdinand, you're expecting too much from a young child, Lampert protested. You call him a young child, but he has already been baptized. Furthermore, he is not just any child, but the child of an Archduke. Under normal circumstances, Wilford would need to work hard and bear more responsibility than Rosamond, who was merely adopted into the Archducal family. However, does it seem to you that Wilford is indeed working harder or bearing more responsibility than her? No, it does not. Yeah, if anybody's going to be the next Archduke or Archduchess, it's Rosamond, because she's the one doing all that work. If you're kind of basing it on that, then between her and Wilford, she would definitely be the one to be it. His arguments made too much sense to disagree with. One day here was enough for me to realize just how talented Rosamond was, as well as how hard she was working each day. Her attendants were all working together to ensure she was so well suited for her roles as the High Bishop and the Archduke's daughter as possible. She was being given a mountain of tasks each day, which she always completed. And yet she has no time for the bookworm. That sucks. But me, on the other hand, what was I doing? My only memories were of running away from work. Lord Ferdinand, you're not wrong, but Lampert began, only for Ferdinand to silence him with a sharp glare, looking much angrier than he had been with me. For a second, his light golden eyes seemed to change colors. Ooh, wait a minute. The crushing. We finally get to see. I want to see the animated. Come on. So he does do rainbowy eyes. Okay. Oh, so he got pissed and his mana kind of gum out. I don't know if he did that on purpose. An instant later, Lampert choked out a gasp, freezing in place and trembling as if glued down by the stare. As Ferdinand leaned in a little closer toward him, Lampert let out a weak groan of discomfort. Wilford is not the only incompetent fool who puts no effort into life. You were the same. If you care for your charge's future, Lampert learned to tie him to a chair and force him to study. Veronica is no longer here. What does he mean by that? I exclaimed in my mind. Ferdinand then glanced my way. Rosamond is a unique girl in more ways than one, so I do not expect Wilford to produce similar results. But if he wishes to be accepted as the Archduke's son, he needs to work at least as hard as she is. Am I wrong? No, you are right, Lampert painfully forced the words out. It was like Ferdinand had cast a curse or something on him, except he didn't have a staff in hand. I had no idea what he was doing to Lampert, but all I could do was tremble as an indescribable fear built up in my heart. Wow, I never would have expected Ferdinand to do that, to be honest. No matter how mad I figured he'd get, I never figured he would do that. Oh, on an ally, anyway. I received a report from Fran that Wilfred successfully memorized the words to prayers last night and successfully hummed the musical scales of a harpspell song this morning. I myself have been forced to accept that he was not born a fool. He can succeed when he tries, and is clearly quite capable of doing so, meaning the blame falls on those who spoiled their charge and raised him into a fool. Be aware this is your responsibility, Ferdinand declared before lowering his gaze and letting out a disappointed sigh. At that point, Lampert collapsed on the table. Lampert, Ferdinand, what did you... Wilfred, Ferdinand said, interrupting me with a heavy voice. As strange as it might sound, this was so overwhelming I didn't really feel like there were weights... It really did feel like there were weights pressing against my stomach. He was looking at me with cruel eyes, cold, dark, golden slits that showed no warmth toward me whatsoever. They were terrifying eyes, unlike anything I had ever seen before, and without even realizing it, my teeth had started to chatter. There is nothing I would like less than to serve someone as lazy, spoiled, and incapable as you. If you continue as you are, I will raise your siblings myself, and crush your political future with all my might. Ooh! I believe he would actually do that. Or rather, he would do that with Rosemine, to be honest. If he had to choose between all three of his siblings, Rosemine would be the one he would do for. Even if she is adopted. She's the one the most capable. But if he had to go with biological blood, it would be one of his two other siblings. But father and grandmother had said that I would be the next Archduke, and I thought that was true no matter what. I'd never even considered that someone might come and defy their words. Hearing that my future wasn't actually secured was like a blow to the head that made me want to cry. It is tradition for the child with the most mana born from the Archduke's first wife to become the next Archduke. You would do well to remember this, he said. I swallowed hard just as fourth bell started to ring. My day spent swap of Rosemine had come to an end. Ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Oh, we're almost done. Okay. Haas's Orphans. Feels good that it's sunny today, huh, Thor? We get to go to the forest now, Rick said after breakfast, stretching in his raggedy outdoor clothes. We'd finished all the paper-making work we could do in the workshop, but 2 days of rain had stopped us from going outside. I speedily changed clothes myself and agreed. Heck yeah. I'm getting real tired of just learning manners all day. I get that we've got to master them, but still. Those of us from Haas had to relearn everything from manners to language, which means we always had things to do during the day. But being expected to do the same stuff every day in a closed space like Ehrenfest's temple was kind of suffocating. Still, I know I was lucky for that to be the worst of my problems. Now, Martha, my sister, wouldn't need to be sold to anyone if they didn't want to be. Even the right eating situation was better since the stronger kids weren't given more food and didn't steal from others. Here, everyone was given the same amount, even newbies like us who weren't even being unfairly beaten like before. I was glad that I decided to go with Lady Rosemine, and I was thankful to her. We were seriously lucky, and she was an amazing person. But even knowing that everyday life in the temple was so much different from what we were used to that it made us uncomfortable. We just couldn't get used to it. Unlike the normal priests who live in the temple, we liked putting on comfy, raggedy clothes and going out to the forest together a lot more than learning to read and speaking properly. Maybe it was because we were raised doing farm work in Haas, but we always ached to go outside on sunny days when we were stuck in the workshop. We spent each day waiting for our chance to gather and work in the forest. Rick and I went down to the stairs of the boys' building, where we found Lady Rosemine's attendant, Gil, handing out baskets and knives. We told him that we could just pick our own tools, but Gil said it made it harder to keep track of everything. Here, Thor and Rick, here's yours, Gil said. Rick and I went outside with the baskets on our backs and knives in hand. The sun was bright, but the chilly air made it clear that winter was on its way. Still, we were so pumped to go to the forest that the cold air didn't bother us at all. Thor, Rick. I quickly turned around in surprise as I heard Nora say our names. I hadn't expected her to be here, but there was a basket on her back, and Martha was beside her. They didn't have gray priest robes on, but outside clothes just like us. It's been a long time since we've all been outside together. Yeah, it's 'cause the girls and boys do different work here, I replied. Back at Haas's monastery, the four of us studied, cleaned, and went to the forest together. But maybe because Ehrenfest orphans had more people, duties were split between men and women here, which meant we couldn't stay together as much. Men worked in the workshop in the forest, while girls made food and handled cleaning. We're going to the forest today. Rick, Wilma said we need lots of firewood and fruit for the winter. Right, Nora, Mars said, looking up at my sister with a smile. Since the orphanage was busy making preserved food for the winter, some of the apprentice grade shrine maidens were also coming to the forest to help gather. Martha and I still aren't used to how they cook and clean in the temple. We're more useful gatherers in the forest than staying here, so it's actually kind of relaxing, Nora said. The orphanage was already packed with people, and now they had to prepare for four more on top of everyone else. A lot of resources were needed for each person, and here they were stuck with the 4 of us. That was why we needed to work harder than anyone else if we didn't want to feel uncomfortable all winter. Not to mention, if we started running out of food, we'd be the ones who'd have our shares taken first. They like to talk about fairness here, but we had street smarts. We knew we'd end up a bloodbath. I gotta work hard so that Nora and Marv don't have to go through that, I thought, tightening my grips on the basket on my back. Whew, always feels good to be outside, I said. Uh-huh, Nora replied. The southern gate opened up to sprawling fields, the forest, trees, and the big blue sky. And on top of all that, the air suddenly got a lot cleaner. Outside the walls, everything was like our hometown of Haas again. That helped me relax a bit. I still wasn't used to how the temple looked or how nasty the air in the lower city was. It's not wrong. The gray priests, on the other hand, grimaced as soon as they stepped through the gate onto the road turned muddy from the recent rain. It would be nice if the stone road could continue outside the city, but unfortunately the Archduke's power is contained within its walls, one said. People raised in the temple were used to walking on white stone, but I hated the raw smell of the lower city, where it was so humid from all the evaporating rainwater. Muddy roads aren't so bad if you just walk on the side of the road with all the weeds, though, I said. The temple is just so pretty that the people raised there don't know how to walk on muddy roads, Nora said with a giggle. It's the same as us being uncomfortable with how clean the temple floors are. They couldn't handle field work like we can. Now that she mentioned it, the priests would probably hate the idea of tilling a field. I'd always really enjoyed doing it since the soil gets soft over time, but I didn't think people in the orphanage would feel the same way. Please gather at the riverbank before 4th bell rings, Gil said before we arrived at the forest. We had all been split up into groups. Some of us would make paper, and others would get firewood, and the rest would gather food. The 4 of us had been assigned to gather fruit and mushrooms. That was my favorite job. Let's get going, everyone, I said when it was time to start, a wide grin on my face. But it wasn't just Rick and Nora who replied. A gray priest whose name I still didn't know butted in. Thor, gathering in groups is insufficient. Please take care to speak properly. In this situation, you should say, shall we go instead? When I said everyone, I wasn't including you, I yelled on the inside. I'd normally protest out loud, but since I knew that he'd probably end up giving me some lengthy lecture, just said I'd be more careful next time. At that, I took Nora's hand and pulled her away. When I turned around, I saw that Rick and Marth were hurrying after us, and since I didn't want the priest to get in the way of us hanging out for the first time in a while, I called one last thing to him, doing my best to sound polite. We'll be gathering raffles over there if you need us. You 4 certainly are good at climbing trees. In that case, we shall gather tanies off the ground elsewhere, the priest replied peacefully before disappearing into the trees along with the others. The priest had only started visiting the forest a year ago, and honestly, they really sucked at gathering. They were slow runners, couldn't climb trees, and could barely tell mushrooms apart. Lady Rosemine was a real weirdo for sending people like that to the forest, and I could guess that Lutz had a real hard time organizing them all at the start. I never would have agreed to do it. Oh, there's a raffle, Marth declared with a smile, rushing to a tree not too far ahead of us. Raffles were a nice autumn fruit. They looked a lot like summer round shells, but were more sour and chewy. Cut raffles dipped in honey were super good in winter. Ah, Marth said, suddenly stopping in place. We all rushed up to her. What's up, Marth? The 2 days of rain knocked some of the raffles down, and I promised Delia that I'd gather a lot of them, too, Marth said, slumping her shoulders as she pointed at the smashed fruit that had fallen from the tree. Delia was a girl in the orphanage with a little brother called Dirk, and she was one of the very few people in the temple who understand the 4 of us wanting to stay together as a family. There were times when she was harsh, but she was good at taking care of people, so Marth really warmed up to her. I'd heard that they became friends after Marth said to Delia how cute she thought Dirk was. I promised Delia we'd make lots of honey-dipped raffles together. She can't leave the orphanage, so I said that I'd gather them for her, but Delia had committed some enormous crime at the end of spring half a year ago. And while she hadn't been executed thanks to Lady Rosemine's compassion, she was sentenced to never leave the orphanage again. Delia herself said she was fine with the punishment since she could stay with Dirk, but I felt bad that she couldn't even go to the forest to blow off steam. Rick patted Marv's back and pointed up at the tree. Don't feel so down, Marv. Take a good look. There's still plenty left. Plus, raffles that aren't fully ripened are the best for dipping in honey. We could still get plenty to bring back to Delia, he said, being as kind to her as always. At that, he took out a cloth meant for catching the raffles. It was my job to knock them down, and after making sure the knife was in my belt, I searched for a fruit big enough to dip in honey. Once I'd spotted one, I started climbing the raffle tree. All right, it's coming down. Wait, you climb way too fast, Thor, Martha explained, looking up at the smile as she spread open her cloth. When I saw that she was ready, I cut the raffle down and watched it fall. Marv caught the fruit, and Rick let an excited shriek as it hit the cloth. I could see Nora picking raffles from the ground and cutting off the parts that were still edible. We could wash those in the river and eat them at noon. Thor, cut down some more. Yeah, gotcha. Working together with everyone made me feel like we were back in Haas. Once we'd finished gathering raffles, accompanied by lots of shrieking and excitement, it was time to gather merrills. They were almost out of season, which meant there weren't too many left. Oh, as fourth bell, I said, we gotta go back to the river. It was time for luncheon as we headed to the river with our baskets full of gathered stuff. Once there, we found the priest cooking soup and steaming branches alongside the potatofuls. We went straight over to the river and started washing the fruits we had cut. Oh, may I ask what you're holding there? A priest washing his hands in the river asked Nora. These are crushed waffles on the ground, so I cut off the edible parts to chow down. I mean to eat at lunch, She replied, That's a splendid idea. There aren't enough for everyone, so we will need to cut them into pieces to distribute, he said. But we have been planning to just share the fruit among the four of us, as there really weren't that many. Trying to share them all among all the priests didn't make any sense. Oh, but that's... You got to. You gotta make it equal. Why do we gotta share with you all? I angrily stood up, only for Rick to hold me back. Thor, you got a knife too, right? Nora, we'll help you cut them, he said, before going right to slicing the raffles into pieces. I watched the priest head to the pot, then glared at Rick. Why are you just accepting that, Rick? We gathered those ourselves. We won't even get a mouthful if we divide them between this many people. I mean, that's just how they do things in the temple. We're getting as much food as anyone there, even though we're newcomers. Only makes sense that we'd split our food with them, too. You want them to cut down the amount of winter food we get because we kept those raffles from them? Rick asked. At that, everything clicked. Everyone was treated equally here. We had to follow that, too. I took out my knife and started cutting the raffles. We were having so much fun with each other that I thought we were back in Haas. I got kind of mad at him like they were taking away our fun again. I get how you feel, Thor. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little frustrated too, Rick said with a sigh, watching as the raffles were sliced into tiny, tiny chunks. Maybe next time we should hide and eat them on our own, Nora said with an impish smile, earning laughter from all of us. All my anger faded away as we jokingly planned how to bring water with us to watch the raffles out of sight from everyone else. Did you have fun hanging out with everyone again? I asked, plopping down to the bed beside Rick's once it's time to sleep. Yeah, but what do you think's going to happen to us now? What do you mean? Back in Haas, we kept going because we'd get land when we grew up, right? But orphans in the temple are completely different. I'm glad Nora and Martha aren't getting sold, but what's going to happen to us now? Rick asked, worrying about the exact same thing I was. Sure, I was glad that Lady Rosamond had saved us, and I was thankful to her. Every day, I was glad that Nora and Martha hadn't been sold away by the mayor. If we could go back in time and do it all over again, I'd slick with Lady Rosamond to protect Nora every single time. But what was our future going to be like? I'd assumed that orphans were treated pretty much the same everywhere, but I was dead wrong. Those in the temple weren't given land when they came of age, and they didn't even get to lead the orphanage. Apprentice grey priests became grey priests, and that was that. The only way for them to lead the orphanage was to be taken on as a blue priest attendant, sold to some noble, or die. All the life plans I had thought of in the past had been crushed in an instant. I had no idea what our future would be like. I really didn't think we would even get to go to the Harvest Festival, I murmured. It was the biggest festival of the year, a great day where everyone could go nuts, even orphans. We had all been looking forward to it, so when we were told that we wouldn't be able to join despite it being held so close by, we couldn't understand what we were hearing. But the priests didn't understand us either. They just looked confused and with very serious expressions asked why we would even be allowed to join the Voice Festival. We are not involved in farm work, and we have paid nothing in taxes. Furthermore, this monastery is not part of Haas. It belongs to Lady Rosamond. Why will we be allowed to join Haas's Harvest Festival when we are not its citizens? Blue priests and shrine maidens accept the taxes and perform religious ceremonies, but there are no religious ceremonies that require our presence, I remember one priest saying. That alone was enough for me to feel like I had been cut away from the world I knew and sent somewhere else entirely. I was happy to have escaped Haas's mayor, but I was just as nervous about my future. Lady Rosamond saved us when we didn't want to be sold away because she was a kind person, but all orphans were treated equally, and she hadn't said anything about the priest expecting us to all act like family. But not quite. She wouldn't allow us to keep our own little family within the temple since everyone there had to be equal. I just hope spring comes soon. I at least want to go back to the monastery, I murmured. While getting under the covers, Rick agreed. Back in the monastery, the few priests there had adjusted themselves a bit to make things more comfortable for the four of us as we got used to our new lives. But here, we were the ones who had to adjust to everyone else. To make things worse, we were in an entirely different city, and the only time we got to be with our sisters was during meals. I missed Haas and its sprawling fields, nearby forests, and wide open skies. It wasn't even winter yet, and I was already homesick. There was nothing I wanted more than to run away from the temple with all its high walls that blocked out most of the sky. We weren't Aaron-Vest orphans, we were Haas orphans. I want to go back to Haas, in my dreams at least, I thought while closing my eyes. Really? Oh, we get to see this! This was way back when. I think. Oh, God. Justice's Grand Lower City Infiltration. How far am I left? Probably 20 pages left. Justice, have you ever been to the Lower City? Ferdinand asked. It was the start of summer the previous year, and he had summoned Eckert and I together. I disguised myself as a traveler and visited farming towns to gather materials many times in the past, but I have never visited Ehrenfest's Lower City since there was nothing to find there. Why do you ask? Is there something there after all? I asked in response. A devouring child by the name of Mine shall be entering the temple as an apprentice Blue Shrine Maiden. I would like for you to gather as much information on her as possible. Here's what we know from the Merchants Guild, Ferdinand said, holding out some boards. Everything here concerns her workshop rather than mine herself. I took the reports from Ferdinand and skimmed them. There were copies of monthly financial reports, the forewoman's bank statements with the Merchants Guild, and a list of business partners. Mine's the forewoman, huh? As for employees, none. It says they belong to the Plant Paper Guild, but does such a guild even exist? It is precisely to answer that sort of question that I need you to gather information on Mine and her activities. Here's what I know myself. Mine has blue hair as dark as the night sky, golden eyes, and a destitute constitution that causes her to appear 5 at best, despite having been baptized. Despite being so weak that she cannot even visit the temple each day, she is such a fervent bookworm that she is willing to spend a large gold and ignore all common sense to directly ask the High Bishop to make her an apprentice shrine maiden. In short, she is a bizarre, incomprehensible child. All information on her will be valuable. Gather it all. A child who would spend a large gold to force her way into the temple all just to read books? Nah, that can't be right. As a noble, it was hard to believe that anyone would ever want to go to the temple, so I didn't know how to react to Ferdinand's claims. But at the same time, I was intrigued. I didn't know a single child who was anywhere near as interesting as his mind seemed to be, and here Ferdinand was asking for any information on her at all. I smiled. My heart was telling me that things were about to get interesting. You will need a servant or guard when entering the Merchants Guild, and the store that does business with the mine workshop. To that end, I would like to ask for your assistance, Eckert. Would you be willing to enter the Lower City? Okay, so I think Eckert was the one who ended up being bedridden in the inn. Okay. If you command it, Lord Ferdinand, Eckert said, wearing a smile as he knelt. He had been working with a dead expression ever since his wife, Hyde Mary, had passed away. This was the first time in ages that I had seen him look so motivated, and as his co-worker, that was nice to see. In that case, prepare for the infiltration at once. You will be riding my carriage to the temple, then changing clothes there, and exiting into the city through the servant door. One of my temple attendants will take you there, Ferdinand said. Thank you very much. It was difficult for nobles to stealthily enter the Lower City. Noble carriages couldn't stop there, and when it came to purchases, merchants were simply summoned to the nobles' quarter. Anyone would find it strange if a poorly dressed man exited from a fine carriage that had departed from the nobles' quarter, so having Ferdinand engineer our entry through the temple's servant door made things a lot easier. I headed home and took out the clothes I had gathered across all of our dirty spent collecting materials. Some were for farming, others for traveling. I added a few garments I had gotten from a merchant who came to the noble's quarter, and the final results weren't too far from the clothes a noble who had dropped ranks would wear. I also sent an ordinance to Eckert telling him to take it as inspiration for the clothes of the merchants who visited his estate. I cannot talk right. On the day of the infiltration, I entered Ferdinand's estate wearing noble clothes, and then had his attendant Losfum change me into merchant attire. By the way, Losfum, did you prepare a bag with a random assortment of vegetables? Yes, Lord Justice. I was quite confused when the ordinance arrived with that message. With a bag of vegetables and a bag of clothes from Losfum in hand, I climbed into the carriage and slowly started heading off. Justice Eckert, here are your funds for this mission, Ferdinand said, handing over a small bag. You may use this money for whatever you like, whether that be gathering information or, as fifth bell was about to ring, renting a room at an inn. Inside the bag were 6 small golds and 6 large silvers. That was far more than one would need to rent a room, but it was a fair payment for work such as infiltrating the Lower City. I accepted this amount and gave half to Eckert. The carriage arrived at the noble's gate, at which point I entered the temple. I had never visited before, since Ferdinand had always forbidden me from going near it, so I was more than a little excited to finally go inside and see what it was like. Ferdinand had dropped us off at the back gate, saying that it would be a problem if the High Bishop Bezenwatz found us. Oh well. Guard, take these 2 to the front door of the back gate, Ferdinand said, and the guard who had opened the door to the carriage guided us to where we needed to go. This is the gate to the Lower City, he said. We passed through into the Lower City just as fifth bell started to ring. The horrible smell and visible filth immediately made me grimace, Not even the farming towns I had visited smelled this bad, and they weren't this dirty either. That's surprising. This is several times worse than riding through in a carriage, Justice. You sure you're up for this? Eckert asked. Not like I have a choice. This is an order from Lord Ferdinand himself. I first wanted to go to the south gate where mine's father supposedly worked. Thanks to flying over the lower city and analyzing its infrastructure, I had a reasonable grasp of where everything was. Eckert and I started moving south down the main street. Unlike the Nobles' Quarter, there were towering buildings of all sorts of colors and designs on either side of the road, with wagons and carriages traveling every which way. It was a shocking amount of pedestrians, too, and not a trace of the order seen in the Nobles' Quarter. I mean, there's so many people there, of course. I see that the lower city is similar to how the further south you go, the lower in status the people get. I mused upon reaching the central plaza and its fountain. There were a wide range of people here, from those wearing the attire of travelers to those in the raggedy clothing of the poor. We had more merchants' clothes to blend in, but in reality we still got more than anyone. Looks like we should change our clothes. Let's get it in, I suggested. Agreed. The foul smell is giving me a headache, Eckert complained. This mission is harder than camping outside to gather materials. It'd probably be difficult to bring him to the Southgate. He didn't have any cheaper clothes than what he was currently had on. Nor was he capable of changing his noble attitude enough to blend in. For that reason, he would be stuck operating in the north part of the city. We decided to get a room in an inn located close to the central plaza on the east side of town where most travelers were. Once inside, the female head of the inn looked us over head to toe with wide eyes. Can't say any fancy-looking customers like yourselves have ever come in here not in a carriage. Looks to me like you're all dressed to visit some nobles. Did your carriage break down? She asked. I see. Merchants wear different clothes when going to the nobles' quarter than what they usually wear. I have visited farming towns here and there more than a few times, but now it was painfully apparent that having never walked in the lower city before was a problem. The commoner facade I had developed during my time at farming towns might not prove too useful. Well, I mean, it'd probably be more useful than your usual attitudes, still. While I was thinking about that, I strode forward and handled matters with the lady. Our carriage had some problems, and our normal clothes got dirty during the incident, so we had to put on our best outfits. I would like to order a large room suitable for my master's status. I see. You got my sympathies. Go ahead and use the nearby well to clean your clothes. If you need to, at this time of year, they'll be dry by morning. But if you need something to wear right away, go out the back door and travel 2 blocks. There's a used clothing store right there. Much appreciated. We'll check it out later, I said, thanking the woman as I took the key from her and headed to our room. Despite having ordered a large one, it was still fairly small. Guess we couldn't expect much more from a commoner and hello. Eckert, once we put our stuff down, let's do something about our clothes, I said. We rushed to the used clothing store that the inn mistress had informed us of, and each asked for a set of business clothes we could wear in place of our best suits, which we had been forced to put on when our normal clothes got dirty. The store owner looked us over with a raised eyebrow. I'm surprised you were willing to walk through town in those clothes at all. Would have been better to keep on the dirty ones, he said, clearly bemused before speedily picking out some clothes. Once we had changed into them, we could finally walk around the city without worrying about drawing attention to ourselves. Hey, mister, ever heard of the mine workshop? It apparently belongs to the Plant Paper Guild, but I don't even know what that is. Mine workshop? Sorry, pal, can't help you there. Never heard of it in my life. It was no surprise that a clothing seller didn't know about it. I shrugged and returned to the inn with Eckert. Eckert, now that we've got some normal merchant clothes, how about we head to the Gilberta Company? I'm too sick to move. Give me some time to rest, Eckert replied. The foul smell of the lower city was so overwhelming that he used cleansing magic to clean his stinking clothes, but that just ended up undoing all the adapting that his nose had done. He pinched his nostrils shut with a groan, saying that he was about to throw up. I watched him from the corner of my eye while speedily changing into farming clothes. I'll go head to the Southgate then. Try to get used to the smell by tomorrow. Forgive me. Aha, that was Eckert. Okay. I grabbed the bag of vegetables and visited the inn. My plan was to search for Gunter at the Southgate and then follow him home to find out where mine lived. That way I could get information on how she acted when she was somewhere she felt more relaxed. As I walked down the main street, I kept an eye on my surroundings, adapting my walking speed and posture to match what I saw. The south side of the city seems to speak a lot rougher, but what I learned in the farming town should do me well here. Maybe because I had been keeping such a close eye on my surroundings, it was almost closing time when I eventually neared the south gate. First thing I saw was a group of about 10 kids, each with baskets on their backs, returning to the lower city. This was the perfect opportunity to gather information on mine. I walked up to the group, pretending to be a farmer, wanting to repay mine for a favor with some vegetables from his farm. Hey kids, any of you know a girl with dark blue hair called Mine? She did me a huge favor the other day, and I want to pay her back, I said, raising the bag of vegetables so they could see. Nope, never heard that name before. She's not from our neighborhood, one replied. Another group soon came through the gate. I asked them the same question, but this time they seemed to know her. Mine? You mean Tule's right? You mean Tule, right? One kid asked, cocking their head. Tule? That's mine's older sister. If she was nice to you, it was definitely Tule. You're definitely mixing them up, mister. Thus I learned that mine had an older sister named Tule, and from that point on, I learned a lot more about Tule. She was kind, considerate, and took care of everyone, especially her sick little sister. She was the only one they wanted to talk about, though. Not a single kid said anything about mine. In fact, they said so little about her that I honestly wanted to ask whether the two really were sisters. What kind of girl is mine? I don't know, she's always sick in bed. I've, never talked to her, another kid said. And thus I learned from that they knew mine was incredibly sick. That all but confirmed we were talking about the same person. Which was nice, but I already knew she was sick from what Ferdinand had told me. I wanted new information. If you want to know about her that much, why not ask Tule, one girl asked. Look, she's right over there. Tule! At that, a green-haired girl holding the hand of a small child started to walk over, blinking in confusion. Her clothes were covered in patches and were a little dirty due to her having just come from the forest. But she looked cleaner than everyone else thanks to her hair being glossy for some reason. I'm looking for a girl named Mai. She did me a favor, and I wanted to give her these vegetables. Everyone's saying she's your little sister, I said. Mine is my little sister, but are you sure she helped you? I think you're probably mistaking her for someone else, Tule said, looking very confused despite being mine's older sister. Was it really that unthinkable for mine to help out a farmer? All the signs were pointing to mine having an awful personality, and Hannah was really worried about Ferdinand taking her into the temple as an apprentice blue shrine maiden. I might have misheard her name, but I'm pretty sure she said it was mine. What is your little sister like? A rotten girl who never helps anyone? No, it's just, when you met mine, was she with anyone? Tule asked. Since making up lies here would complicate things in the future, I said she was alone just to keep things simple. The moment Tule heard that, she smiled. Then you're definitely mixing her up with someone else. Mine never goes outside alone. We don't let her, because she's so sick it'd be dangerous for her to walk around by herself. And so I learned that mine was in fact so sickly she couldn't even go outside alone. But again, I was looking for information not related to her health. It'd be hard to keep gathering info using this cover story now, that Tule had concluded I wasn't actually talking about her little sister. So I need to change my battle plan. Okay, alright, anyone know anything about the mine workshop then? I heard she's the forewoman over there. Never heard about it, one kid answered. What kind of workshop is it? Is it not around here? It's not around here, right? Hold on, I got feels like something in my eye. It seemed that none of the kids knew about it, but Tule gave me a visibly guarded look. This must have been information that only her family knew about, so just asking about it was enough to make them suspicious. Oh boy. I heard it's a paper workshop, but I don't know the details. Nobody I've met knows anything either. I might have just misheard it. My bad for stopping you. Here, have some vegetables for the journey home, I said, handing out the veggies to the kids before continuing to walk toward the south gate. I could feel Tule's eyes on my back more than a few times as I went. After a short while, I turned around just in time to see them disappearing into an alley. From there, I tracked the group to confirm where the mine lived. Suffice to say, it wasn't the kind of building that a girl who had a large gold to spare would be living in. After that, I went to the south gate where I learned that Gunter was absent due to being on morning duty. I tried asking the guards about Gunter's daughter instead, but all I learned was that he was head over heels for his family. Don't go digging into Gunter's family if you know what's good for you. He either raved about his wife and cute daughters until your ears fall off, or threatened the crap out of you if he thinks you're trying to hurt them, one guard said with a genuinely concerned look. Everyone else there seemed to agree with him. I told me all I needed to know about how her family worked, but I still didn't have anything about mine herself. What kind of life did she live to run a workshop without basically anyone knowing about it? So you learned where she lives and what her family's like, then, Eckert asked. Yeah, I never would have thought that the people around mine would know so little about her. She barely leaves her house, and when she does, she's so weak that she needs someone to come with her no matter what. It's pretty clear that we'll learn nothing if we keep trying to play by the book. What's your plan, then? We'll sneak into the Merchant's Guild at night. They should have plenty of documents on the one workshop, I replied, looking out the window as I changed my farmer attire into merchant clothes. If the people around her didn't know anything, then I have to check on her place of work. I agree with Eckert not wanting to eat food from such a filthy place, so we had some of our night's order field rations and then took naps. 7th bell rang some time later, and gradually the loud bustle of the main street calmed down. The clatter and yells of arguing drunks and soldiers maintaining order faded, by which time Eckert's nose had readjusted to the air. I ran through the now quiet lower city, making our way to the Merchant's Guild. A drunkard blocked our path halfway through, but Eckert quickly drove him away. There's a magic lock, but it seems like a fairly weak one. What's even the point in it? Eckert asked as once he arrived. Commoners don't have any mana, so I'd guess any magic lock would stop them in their tracks, I said. The plan had been for Eckert Justice smashed the lock in the case that it was a normal metal one, but this required a different approach. Seems like this is the work of a slave noble. Should be easy to unlock. I whipped out my staff and unlocked the door in no time, and slid inside and used a candle with light amplifying magic to illuminate the floor as I climbed the stairs. We found another magic tool on our way up. It seemed this merchant's guild used a few of them. The magic tool applied to commoner organizations such as this. One were very often maintained with face stones containing lace collar on it, and the demand was a fairly important source of income for the poorer nobles. Justice, what magic tool is this? Eckert asked. I touched the face stone part of the tool with my staff and carefully looked at the magic circle inside. Seems like it has a simple identification function. All you have to do is pass its registered Armana, I replied. It registered Armana, causing a gate that was blocking the staircase to fade away. It seemed the upper level was just for the richer merchants, and there was a thick carpet spread across the floor which was more spacious than the last one. We opened a door to the side in search of a file room and began looking through the documents within. They were organized by the name of the workshop, and our search progressed relatively quickly thanks to how tidy it was. Whoever worked here must have been fairly talented. The mine workshop mainly deals with the Gilberta Company, but I see some transactions with a lumber yard and a craftsman. Let's check around the Gilberta Company tomorrow, I suggested. The next day we headed to the Gilberta Company dressed as merchants. A guard standing outside the door swiftly went inside as we approached, and not long after, a narrow-eyed servant with dark brown hair came outside and pressed his right fist against the palm of his left hand. I am Mark at the Gilberta Company. May I ask what business you have with our humble store, he asked. His smile was peaceful, but I could tell he was on guard. His wary eyes reminded me of Thule from yesterday. At the very least, it was clear that he didn't intend to accept us inside as customers. It was possible that he had been informed we were investigating the mine workshop. I glanced at the Gilberta Company behind him. I had thought they would be selling plant paper, but it seemed they mainly deal in clothes and apparel. Guess the used clothing store from yesterday sold us out. Yep, most likely. Either way, it would be better to find information elsewhere than to push matters and put them on the defensive. I just saw some strange hairpins from outside and got curious. We'll be staying out here. I see. Take your time, then. We watched for a short while as customers and employees flitted in and out of the Gilberta Company, then left. Are you sure you didn't need to go inside, Justice? Eckert asked. The Gilberta Company's on guard against us. Let's try somewhere else, I replied. There was no harm in going to the various craftsmen that mine had ordered from. People who had actually done business with her would naturally have more information for me. Mine? Who's that? Can't say I know that name, a guy from the lumberyard said with a hand on his chin. She's a weird little girl with connections to the Gilberta Company. Pretty sure she's a forewoman who's done business here. Before I explained, trying to jog his memory. Ah, the tiny girl from Benno's place. They don't really say her name much, so it slipped right by me. That's just because you don't like to do paperwork, a passing marker mentioned, clearly exasperated. Shut it. Now get back to work, the foreman shouted before shaking his head. What do you want to know about her? She came to us with a business deal too, but we don't know if she actually is a proper foreman or not. We just don't feel comfortable doing business with a girl that small, I said with a faux worried tone. The foreman nodded in understanding. Yeah, I get how you feel, but you don't get anything to worry about. Benno's backing her, and she knows exactly what she needs. She don't talk or act like a kid her age, but she's good at what she does. Even saw her write a supply order right in front of me. No problems at all. She can do business just like an adult. No need to worry about the pay either. It'll become, he said confidently, giving me the most meaningful information yet. It seemed like it would be a good idea to refer to her as the weird little girl backed by the Gilberta Company to her other business partners. And my instincts were right. When I went to the stores and spoke to those she did business with, all I needed to do was bring up the weird little girl and say I was worried about how young she was to get people to talk. She looked young enough to be pre-baptism, but ordered things that people had never seen or heard of before. She spent money in an abnormal way. She was clumsy with her hands. She bought a ton of string. She passed out on the street and had a Gilberta Company worker hurriedly carry her home. All in all, I was getting so much easy information that it felt like all my struggling before had been a joke. Everywhere I go, people call her a weird girl, but it sounds to me that she's more extraordinarily talented and knowledgeable than weird. I said, a smart child capable of doing skilled work sounds like the perfect apprentice Blue Shrine made it for Ferdinand to take in. Eckert nodded, agreed. It seems we have a positive report for Ferdinand now. I nodded as well and looked over the market in a good way. In a good mood. It was market day by the west gate, and there were a ton of interesting-looking stands lined up. No markets were ever held in the Nobles' Quarter, and I had never seen this many stands set up together during my time in farming towns. Want to take this opportunity to look around, I asked Eckert. You don't want to leave as soon as possible? I shrugged and told him to go back to the inn to get our stuff together, then started wandering around. The market was filled with miscellaneous stands that stocked all sorts of things I didn't recognize or understand. One had a fancy case with an actual book inside it for some reason, a book that was a lot fancier than what you would expect to see around these parts. Hey, shopkeep, what's with the book? Isn't the place for something like that, right? I asked, pointing at the book. The shopkeep looked at it and shook his head. As it turned out, the guildmaster of the Merchants Guild had apparently called for him out of nowhere and told him to go and visit a lay noble mentioning that they were interested in funding a store for him. The shopkeep, of course, ran over with a ton of money, overjoyed at his opportunity. But once there, he was asked whether he was going to be lending them money, and was then promptly ordered by the noble to hand over his coin. The book had apparently been forced onto him as collateral for the loan, and when the due date for the return came, the shopkeep visited the noble, only for the house to have since changed hands. A noble he didn't recognize at all came out, and he said he didn't know the merchant, and then kicked him out. In short, they go out of their way to call merchants like me over to fund their escapes. The owners of big stores can afford contract magic, so they target poor merchants like me looking to start over new stores, the man continued. The financial hit was apparently severe enough that the man had petitioned the guildmaster for payment, but he had simply responded that it was a necessary step in the process of getting a noble-funded store, and paid only a small consolation fee. Nobles teaming up to trick commoners, huh? That's not uncommon, but you've got my sympathy, I replied. Despite being a noble myself, I don't feel the need to defend their actions at all. I have absent-mindedly replied to his complaining while looking at the book's cover. Still, a lay noble had this book? It's way too fancy for a lay noble. It had an elaborate cover that one would expect to see on the book of an arch-noble, and most books with that sort of cover were usually about magic. That was strange, though, since a noble with money problems selling a magic-related book to a commoner would really need to buy it back. I tended to have the crest of the noble that owned it embellished inside, so one look would have likely been enough to tell me exactly who had pulled such a dirty trick to rip off the shopkeep. Hey, shopkeep, my boss is a real book lover, and he's got a bit of a collection. Mind letting me look at the book? You can hold this for insurance, I said, swatting a small gold on the table since I knew he'd be afraid of me stealing the book. Otherwise, his face lit up as though he had finally found hope, at which point he unlocked the case and delicately took out the book. I'm just going to pray that it's a book your home doesn't already know. The only other person who's wanted to see it was this weird little girl who crossed my stand way back while I was still holding it as collateral. A weird little girl? What kind of girl? I asked on the instinct, since I had been asking people for information on a weird little girl over and over all day. At first she asked to look at the book, but then she suddenly threw herself on the ground and started begging to smell and read at rubber cheeks against it. That was as surprised as I had ever been. Never met a kid that weird in my life. I couldn't help but snort. That was exactly how Ferdinand said mine always acted. Wait, is he talking about mine? Is this mine here? I want to see this. I want to see this weird girl. What, do you know this girl? The shopkeep asked. Nah, but I've heard of another weirdo just like her. Not sure whether it's the same person, but I know of a girl who was trying to pay a large gold to the temple just to see a book. You gotta be kidding, that's ridiculous. With that much money, you could just buy a bunch of books yourselves. I didn't hear her mentioning the smell of ink or anything, though. Probably a different person, I said, exchanging another chuckle with the shopkeep. But in reality, I was confident they were the same person. No way were these two kids in the world who were so desperate for books they would lose their minds over them. All right, let's take a look, I said, picking up the book and opening it carefully. The last page, which normally had the noble crest on it, had been sliced off, a sign that whoever had sold the book didn't want it to be seen. Oh, it was stolen. Okay. There was a chance it was a stolen book, but either way, it was indeed a book about magic, which wasn't something best left with commoners. I'm going to buy this, but the price might be a little high. I glanced at the pouch of money that Ferdinand had given me. I had 2 more small golds on top of the small gold I had handed over as collateral, but that wasn't enough to buy a book with a cover this elaborate. So, does your boss own it? Nope, this is a new book. I'd like to buy it, but this is all I can offer you, I said, taking out the other 2 small golds. I would have liked to cover all the money that the trickster noble had taken from him, but I would need to go back to the noble's quarter to get more for it. The stand only goes up on market day, right? I'm going to be leaving the city today, so nah, that's more than enough. I never thought I'd get this opportunity to sell it at all, so yeah. The shopkeep replied. Considering the quality of the book, buying it for 3 small golds was an incredible steal, but the shopkeep seemed more than happy with the exchange. I'm guessing the guy didn't he didn't get much for it. The next day, I was summoned to Lord Ferdinand's estate to report what I had learned to this lower city, and so the only thing I learned from the people around her was how weak she was. But those who have done business with the mine workshop all recognized her as a weird but talented child, I said. I knew that she was weird from the first time I met her, Ferdinand murmured in response. Furthermore, I believe that this is the book she said she wished to smell the ink of, I said, explaining how the shopkeep at the stand had mentioned a weird little girl interested in the book. Ferdinand had a distant look in his eyes. Now that you mention it, when first faced with the Bible, she leaned forward and smelled its ink. She did the same thing in front of Ferdinand. What kind of mad girl is this mine? But Ferdinand, shall I bring this book to the temple library? You said yourself that it is a magic book. Deliver it to the library in my estate, Ferdinand said, placing 3 small golds in front of me. And so the book I had purchased from the lower city was stored on one of Lord Ferdinand's bookshelves, forever escaping mind's ink-sniffing clutches. So you're the tax official assigned to Rosemine, Justice? Impressive, considering that you were Lord Ferdinand's attendant, not a scholar, Eckert said with an exasperated tone. I snorted and shook my head. I've got scholar qualifications, and I've been doing scholar work in the castle ever since Lord Ferdinand entered the temple, he said. Though he doesn't have any other scholars he can trust, and with the Ob's orders backing me, there's no one who can argue for me being here, especially when Rosemine's father, Lord Carstead, agreed to it. Eckert and I were waiting in a meeting room for Ferdinand and Rosemine to arrive. This would be my first time meeting her. My first time meeting the fabled Mine, who had risen from a commoner to a blue shrine maiden thanks to her mana, only for them to then displace Besenwath, the High Bishop, and be adopted by the Archduke. I know she's a weird kid, but let's see what kind of fancy noble girl she's turned into. Information on her was considerably hard to find, and she's so special that Lord Ferdinand willingly took her into his custody. I'm real interested in seeing just what kind of kid she is. What do you think about her, Eckert, now that you're her big brother and all? I'm just glad that Lord Ferdinand seems to be enjoying himself. Though personally, I would rather never go to the lower city again, he replied with a scrunched up face. And that was when the door opened. Eckert, Justice, I appreciate you both waiting for us. Eee! Okay, I am done. I will get to work on everything, and I'll see everybody next time.